Hello and welcome. My name is Victoria Bergval, and I'm the Secretary of the League of Women Voters of the Copper Country, LWVCC. This is a recorded presentation developed by the League of Women Voters of the Copper Country, and it concerns steps being taken by the Houghton County Board of Commissioners to replace the current county jail. This process has advanced to the point where now the input from the public is essential. For decades, the LWVCC has been concerned about the extremely poor conditions of the Houghton County Jail. In 2007, the League formally adopted a position in support of a new jail facility, and we updated that position in 2018 to include support for, and I quote, comprehensive planning to include the needs of the offices housed in the historic courthouse, including administrative offices, the courts, and the administrative offices of the Sheriff's Department, as well as the jail, end quote. In the last few years, the Board of Commissioners of Houghton County has taken significant steps towards deciding how to address the jail problem. That process has involved deliberations by the county board and consultations with various stakeholders serving on a jail committee. The League was represented in this committee by Faith Morrison, who is the co-president of the LWVCC. Today, she is presenting an overview of the work of the committee, along with information about the report produced by experienced jail designers who've closely examined Houghton County's jail and our needs. Thank you, Faith, for your work on the committee, and we look forward to your presentation now. Faith?
Oh, thank you very much, Vicki. I appreciate that. So thank you all who are watching this video. I want to begin with a quick reminder that there is a target on this presentation, which is that the Houghton County Board of Commissioners is having a special meeting open to the public on April 15th at the courthouse, in the courtroom itself, the largest room in the courthouse, to get the feedback from the public on these plans that I'm going to introduce to you just now in this recording. This is a key meeting. Please come. If you can't come, it is at 10 a.m. in the morning. You can participate through Microsoft Teams. It'll be an online participation. Those who participate online will be, if there's time, allowed to also ask their questions. And then the other point is that if you can't come to that meeting, you can send your comments directly to the Board of Commissioners with the contact information that's online. So please, thank you for coming and becoming informed. And please know that there are many pathways to get your opinion in before the decision is made on exactly what to do about the jail. So as Vicki said, I sit on a committee, a very large committee that met and has been discussing, trying to give input to the decision makers about the issues with the Houghton County Jail. Let me tell you the story. So the Houghton County Jail is in our beautiful 1887 courthouse right next door. And this actually, what we're facing in this discussion, which is a jail that is severely out of date, it's not the first time that's happened in Houghton County. So in 1960, the conditions of the jail, which was part of the courthouse itself, became so poor. They lacked fire protection, escape routes. It was dangerous for the staff. It was impossible to deal with female detainees in any reasonable way. It was just awful. And it was so awful that the circuit court ordered the jail closed. So they do have the powers to do this if our facilities are sufficiently out of what is expected. So they closed the jail in July of 1960, and the county offered a millage to try to fix the jail, and it failed. It failed in November, and then they offered the millage again the following January, and it failed again. All right. So that was the public saying, we don't want to fix the jail. Well, that is what voting allows, but it doesn't mean that the jail won't be fixed. The jail was closed in February, and all of the prisoners were transferred to nearby counties, Marquette and Baraga in that case. And all the charges for moving those prisoners, housing those prisoners, they came right back to Houghton County. So it didn't save any money to not fix the jail. In fact, it cost a ton of money. It was only resolved when a current millage, a millage was passed in 1962, and the new jail, the one we call the 1963 jail, was finally built in 1963. So more recently, we seem to be repeating this pattern. So the 1963 jail became out of date after 20 years. That seems reasonable that you would need to update things after 18 or 20 years. It was remodeled. A work camp was opened for prisoners who could qualify for the lower level of vigilance of the work camp, which wasn't that many of the prisoners, unfortunately, eventually. And a millage was sought to do something about the jail situation in 2000, and that failed. There was another millage request in 2010 that failed, and another in 2018. So the costs for fixing the jail in 2000 and 2010 and 2011 were quite a bit lower than what we're looking at now in 2025. And so there can be a little bit of regret about that. But the truth is there's no better time to build a jail than the current time, because things are only getting more expensive and we should fix the jail now. So the votes for the various millages have been, they were very poor, 25% yes votes for the first two. The last one was 49%, but also failed. So the Board of Commissioners of Houghton County are looking for an August millage this year, and we want to talk to you about what they've done to think about what should be asked for in a responsible way. So let me also begin by what would happen if we don't act? And I've kind of told that story while telling you about the takeover of our jail in the 60s. So that could happen again. And in fact, the sheriff has informed us that if that happens again, they will not be going to Marquette and Barraga County. They will be going downstate because there are not spaces for those prisoners to go in the UP. And so that means that the cost and energy and the work of the deputies and the jail staff is going to be even worse than it was in 1960, trying to move people around. So these are our detainees. They have to come back to Houghton County for their court appearances. So it's back and forth and back and forth, and all the bills will come to Houghton County. Okay. We also heard the jail committee heard from Sheriff Bob Perriam from Monroe County, Florida, who's a Youper who ended up a sheriff in Florida. And he had personal experience of being the sheriff in charge of a jail that was taken over by the federal courts. And he was quite adamant that it was awful. It cost them not just all those transportation fees that I've talked about, but attorney's fees, and they lost control of their jail. So whatever the overseers said had to be done, that's what was done. The sheriff didn't get to decide anymore. The county commissioners didn't get to decide anymore. So for both those reasons of the exorbitant costs and wanting to be the ones to decide for our own jail, it was the responsible decision of our Board of Commissioners that we should try to address the problems in Houghton County. So what the board did last year was go out and look for some expertise. This is a bit different from 2018. In 2018, the county designed the jail addition itself, but it's a very complex process to design a jail. There are many regulations related to how these are run and about how many square foot can be done for whichever purpose. And there are mistakes that could be made, and mistakes, as we all know, in construction, change orders are very expensive. So it behooves us to ask experts, folks that know more about how to plan and build a jail. And we looked around, in fact, the sheriff did this, looked around for who had advised some local projects up here in the UP, and he found the Bon Marché Bice and Securitecture team. That is the one that they engaged. So this is the team that built the Delta County Jail in 2018, and they've completed more than 20 UP correctional projects. So this is experience. So these are construction of jail experience teams that have good information about what do the needs look like in various counties of various types, and what are the trade-offs to different choices that are made in design. So those are our consultants. These representatives from the consultants, these are the authors of the master plan that's posted right now on the Houghton County website. If you want to take a look at the whole 50+ page plan, and I definitely encourage you to do so, just go to the Houghton County website, and the first thing on the top page is a link to a page where you can get to that document. So they've prepared this document for us, and they're coming on April 15th, 2025, to talk to the County Board of Commissioners about the designs and the next steps to take in choosing to address the jail situation. So inside that report, the consultants address the issue of maybe not building a new jail. So they start with the jail that we have, the 1963 jail, and they say, what would it take to fix it up? Maybe that's the most inexpensive way to fix the jail problem. So that is completely addressed in that report, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit. And then they said, well, what if we want to build a new jail? And they looked at that separately, using as the place for it a new piece of property that the county has already obtained on Sharon Avenue at the top of the hill there, former church building at the top of the hill. Those reports of the county acquiring that property have been in the local media, so that is been public knowledge, and now they're acting on the possibility of designing and building a jail up there. But first, before we accept that there's a need to build a new jail, let's look at the issue of the current jail. So this is from the consultant's report, and they looked at the Michigan Department of Corrections standards for different pieces of a jail. And out of 14 MDOC, Michigan Department of Corrections standards, our current jail is generally compliant in a single area. 1 out of the 14 areas is our jail compliant, generally compliant. So it's deficient. So this has to do with important things like the processing area for new detainees, detox cells for people who come to the jail under the influence of something and they need to detox. The control centers that are used for overseeing, we have a linear jail in Houghton in the 1963 jail, and how are those who are looking after those who are detained, how are they able to actually monitor them, deficient, etc. There's also many, many pieces, and if I went into all of them, we would never be done with this presentation, but maybe you'll agree with me that 1 out of 14 is a pretty poor score, and it's very, very far from, even, D- passing score for our current jail. Now, the current jail has 28 beds, and one of those deficiencies it has is that, well, I should say several of those deficiencies involve things that take space. So it takes space to properly deal with male and female prisoners separately. It takes space to separately deal with adults and juveniles. We can imagine young people can get into a little bit of trouble, and sometimes the trouble is big enough that they find themselves in the jail. But there are standards that must be followed for dealing with juveniles because they are young people, and we don't want to throw them into cells with hardened criminals. So that takes space. So the idea of fixing up the jail and trying to deal with the current building is really constrained by the size of its footprint, the size that it has there on that right next to the courthouse. So these are some of the examples shown on my slides that the consultants pointed out that the space needs significant space deficiency, a 3 out of 10 on just space needs, out of compliance with rules like the Americans with Disability Act, but also just some spaces are not provided that are now a part of the standard operating system of jails in Michigan. I had already mentioned that we have a linear jail. The linear block configuration is very difficult for the sheriff's workers in the jail to monitor, and that is another source of limitation. So this issue that I just said verbally, that things take space in order to do all the detention and holding of people in a modern jail, that issue is generally called the classification issue. So if you're classified as a male or a female, if you're classified as a juvenile or an adult, if you're classified as a felon or a misdemeanor, these are categories that classify you and trigger certain rules in how the jail has to be operated. There has to be sight and sound separation so that somebody who's there for a minor a minor case doesn't have to have quite as much exposure to whatever visual and loud things might be gone in the rest of the jail. And then as I'm showing on this slide, in a modern jail where they have this more radial configuration of the cells, some of the cells, again, to save money, will hold a larger number of people who are being detained, or like 8. But if you have an 8-person jail for women and you only have 2 women, then you're going to have 6 empty spots. If you have only 1 felon and you have a 2-person jail for felons, 1 spot. So that issue of not wanting to mix people who are classified differences, it kind of fluffs up the size that a jail is. So jails are not aiming to be completely full. What they're aiming to be is to be completely appropriately available, to have the services, the kind of facilities, and to be a workable jail that the staff can actually manage. And so there'll always be a slightly bigger, it's about a 20% bigger jail than what they actually would just count as numbers of people who are in the jail population. So that 20% number, that classification factor, says that if we have a 28-bed jail, but that's the max. If we just use kind of an average rule of thumb on classification, we really only have a 22-bed jail, 22 population served jail. So how many is our average daily population, which in the shorthand of people who build jails is the ADP, the average daily population of the jail. And according to the numbers that our consultants have pulled together, and that's about 42 is the expected number. It's got a little bit, it is looking at, they were very careful in how they handled the COVID years. They don't want to imply that anything that happened in the COVID years is typical. And if you come to the meeting on the 15th, the consultants will be there and you can ask them about any of these things that you would like to hear more about. Okay, so for our average daily population, the size of the jail that we need in Houghton County is about 51. So what you're going to be seeing in the calculations about our jail currently and about the future ones is about a 60-person jail, just a slight increase, rounding up, I suppose we could call it, but we're not making a gigantic jail. There is no intention whatsoever of renting out spaces to neighboring jails who need more space. And I'll talk a little bit more about the size of the jails when I go over the plans that they're looking at. So just to summarize a little bit. Because of classification, because there are different reasons that people are in the jail, and different people there for different reasons have to be confined in different ways, our jail really, even if we put all of our effort into just fixing up what we have, it would only hold 22, and we would be something like 20 beds short. We would not have solved the problem. So fix up the jail. Shall we fix up the jail? Our conclusion is no, we shouldn't fix up the jail. It is not a good investment of the county's money to fix up the jail. There's severe deferred maintenance. I didn't even talk about the leaky roof and the other things that are not working that have to be fixed, those millions of dollars in deferred maintenance. But the minute we fix anything up that's substantial, we have to fix everything. That's the same way that it works in a lot of construction around the country, that once you start changing, if you don't change things, you can sometimes be allowed in on the prior rules and not have to have your septic up to speed, or not have to have something else up to speed. But the minute you rebuild that house, you got to put the septic up to code, you got to put the electrical up to code. I think everybody who does construction understands that thing. Our jail, because we put it off for more than 2 decades, we can't do that anymore. We have to make a fix. And once we do a fix, we're in for the road. So we have to come up to Americans with Disability Act issues. We have to provide for the spaces that are non-compliant in size. We have to add the required spaces for folks to meet with their lawyers, and to other required recreation and getting medical care. Those things are now part of the code. And the jail is lacking in storage. So we are, and then as I said before, that linear configuration of the jail is very hard for the staff to maintain their visual monitoring standards. And they really would like to go to more that radial structure that is the modern jail standard. So fix up the jail. No. It can still be discussed. Questions on the 15th, questions to the county board, welcome. But in order for us to bring up our operations in Houghton County up to date with regulations, it really doesn't make sense, in our opinion. So that leaves us with building a new one, which frankly it's a daunting task. Where should we do it? How big should it be? We've been through this twice before. There was a plan to build a jail right in downtown Houghton across the street from the courthouse. There was in 2018, there was a plan to attach a significant addition on the back of the courthouse. What do the outside folks feel that have seen jails be built and who really understand the ins and outs of the Michigan Department of Corrections? And then a very important to the voters of Houghton County is how much will it all cost? So that is in that document that we got from the jail constructing experts that we brought in with the county. So first question, where should we build the jail? And I already mentioned that the county has secured a site. And one of the reasons the county secured that site was because the solution that was attempted in 2018 of building in downtown Houghton with an addition on the historic courthouse was very unpopular with a large sector of the voting community. They didn't want that jail facility in the downtown, very close to the downtown business district. They didn't want it in the residential areas, which is where the courthouse is located. But there is a rule that the jail must be in the county seat, and the county seat of Houghton County is the city of Houghton. So what the county commissioners have done is identified, it was actually a piece of property in Portage Township, not in the city of Houghton, but up there on the hill on Sharon Avenue, in an empty church, with the land that is also part of the church property. They went through the trouble of securing it, meaning purchasing it, but also negotiating and working with the Portage Township Board. Thank you very much, Portage Township Board, for working. And thank you very much with the city of Houghton, because Portage Township Board had to agree to relinquish the property to the city of Houghton in terms of jurisdiction. And the city of Houghton had to accept that jurisdiction, and that work has been done. So the Portage Township Board has, everybody has passed resolutions that indicate that if a jail is not built on that site, those things reverse entirely. So that is only for the purpose of building a jail, is that property now in Houghton City. So that part is done. And there is a building, and there is a possibility of using the church building in the design, and you'll see that when we talk about the designs. So this Sharon Avenue property shaped just like this. The buildings are in the center of the lot. It gives a lot of flexibility to have that much property. There is in fact space to put more than just the jail there, and we will talk about those ideas as well and those costs. So it is in the possession of the county and ready for the kind of calculations and discussions that are ongoing. So the next question was, how big should it be? So I've already touched on that a little bit, but I can tell you from working on the jail committee and talking to the commissioners, nobody wants to overbuild this jail. Nobody wants to build something that is expensive to run or too big for what we need. We don't need the business of other people's detainees. We just want to do right by Houghton County. We also want to do right by the workers who work around the jail, around or in the jail. And currently the jail is right next to the courthouse, and the sheriff's people have to go to the jail to get somebody to go to the courts, and they have to go outside and walk around the outside of the building, use the public areas to access the courtroom. And this is not safe. We also heard at one of the meetings of the jail committee, we heard from another individual whose name I have, but I didn't prepare it for this talk, but I can talk to you about him. But he told a story about a jail that he was associated with where there was a retired sheriff's deputy who was hired to, because there was all this back and forth and back and forth. It became a staffing issue. They hired a retired sheriff's deputy to move the prisoner from the jail to the courthouse. And the detainee got the better of the deputy during the transfer, and somebody died. You know, it was just awful. So most of our detainee, et cetera, circumstances do not involve that level of seriousness. We are very happy to have good peace and order here in Houghton County, but we can't keep passing these kind of transfers in and out of the public areas. It's very nerve-wracking. It's not a great idea for anybody who has to share space. There are standards, there are methods, and those are the ones that really have to come to us here in Houghton County. So what the consultants did was they looked at our trends, and they also looked at things like the fact that there have been some early releases of people who had sentences in the jail because the jails got overfull. So the jails were quite overfull before COVID, and then during COVID, the population went down a little bit. But the question is, what's the real number of our average daily population if we weren't in the extraordinary circumstance of COVID and nobody's leaving the house? And if what the judges actually and the juries actually decided on for somebody's punishment was actually carried out instead of an early release because the jails are too full. Okay, so those are sophisticated ways of looking at the question of how big is too big. And that, again, makes to the point of why we have these folks who have a lot of experience in jail billing to know that you have to think about that. You don't want to have to keep doing that. You want to allow the courts and the juries to make the decision and then have the facilities able to have those individuals who are convicted and sentenced to carry out their sentences. All right, so the consultant's approach is it's a baseline that we're going to bring the facility. This new facility will be up to date. It has to be affordable. It has to be safe for the staff who handle detainees and who staff the jail. And whatever we do, if it does end up still in downtown, that would be, say, keeping the old jail and fixing it up would mean the jail would stay downtown. Then the safety of those in the courthouse has to be addressed so that they are safe, which currently is not that is not a good, we do not have practices that we want to keep in that area. They also looked around at various other counties in the state, and we all know that not all the other counties are like us. And so they picked, and I'll be showing a graphic of those counties. They picked different counties of comparable population and comparable jail population so that we could compare apples to apples. So that is also part of their decision making. So as I said previously, the average daily population is about 42 based on their handling of the data. And when you fluff that up for classification, it comes to 51 spaces because the classification means we might have some empty spots because of how we have to house people. This is not a growth line where we want a bigger jail. It's basically the jail that we need now with just a little bit of ease. Anytime you build something, you don't want to build it right to where you know you need and then find you outgrow it within a month or two or a year or two. So they are looking at 60 beds as a minimum. And they also gave us numbers for 70 and 80 beds as well. So just in summary, the current jail has 28 beds, which is really 51 when classification is taken into account. We have not used some sort of exponential increasing assumption of the population of the jail. Relatively flat projections have been used. And the issue of those who are sentenced to a certain term that's appropriate as determined by the courts, we need to have space to allow them to serve those terms. The consultants also point out that the construction costs never go down. I hope nobody's going to argue with that. They're not going to go down. So this is the most cost-effective time to build the jail. And they are planning for a single centralized control room so that staffing doesn't have to grow beyond a certain amount, and that inherent safety for jail staff and transfers to and from court have to be built into the plan. So here's that map that I said I would show you. In red, you see various counties, both in the UP and in the Lower Peninsula, that according to the metrics that the consultants are using, are comparable to our jail. And they look at numbers of beds per 1,000 in population. And so Chippewa County has almost 5 beds per 1,000. Delta County has 4.2, and currently Houghton has 0.8 beds per 1,000. So we are the smallest. When we bump it up to the 60-person bed, we will have 1.6 beds per 1,000, which will still not move us out of the bottom of this list. So you can see Gratiot County has 1.7. So their 70-person jail has 1.7 per 1,000 in population. And our, if we built it, 60-person jail would have 1.6 beds per 1,000. So I believe this makes the case that we are not overbuilding with a plan for 60 beds. So my list of things to consider and that the consultants considered in their report. They said where, we're saying Sharon Avenue, not in downtown Houghton, good access to roads, etc. Big enough space. How big? 60 beds, classification. Now, what about the courts? Because the courthouse is right next to the current jail, and it's very convenient, and the sheriff's staff and the court staff and the county staff can all be in touch with each other because of that location really close together. So let's talk about what the court's needs are. Then I'll talk about the courthouse a little bit, and then we'll get to the prices. So what's the deal with the courts? There are 3 courts in our courthouse: the district court, the circuit court, and the probate and family court. But the predominant use of the predominant court activity is the 97th District Court, which is 92% of the caseloads in the county. Those caseloads have been steady. There's not some rising trend that we have to worry about. So we don't need a bigger courthouse. There are issues that the courts want us to know about that, again, once we open the idea of things moving up to Sharon Avenue, that also opens up that we'll probably be renovating the courthouse or building another courthouse, some other courtroom up by the jail, or we'll be building a courtroom where let the old jail be the courtroom. All kinds of things pop into the mind. So this is what Judge Davatala told me when I asked him, can you just please help us understand what are the needs of the courts? And he said, the juvenile issue is really a problem. So the current jail has inadequate space for juvenile offenders. The county must transport juveniles to St. Ignace or Lower Michigan to be held. We don't have the facilities. No jail between here and St. Ignace has the space. So if your neighbor, young man who gets a little bit energetic and finds himself having been arrested, he's going to be escorted to St. Ignace or downstate. And then when his time before a judge happens, somebody's going to have to go get him and bring him back. That's the current state of affairs. So even if it's a temporary visit, somebody has to go and bring him to the court. So all the new jail plans have to include the right facilities for juvenile detention. And as I said previously, the judge said overcrowding leads to rush release. Okay, the need to house serious offenders imposes pressure to release lesser offenders. So if that's one of your major issues, hey, these people do these rotten things and then they only get 2 days in jail or 2 months in jail instead of a longer term. This is why that's happening. There's no space to hold them. And so they say, well, let them go because there's something more serious. We have to give their space to somebody else. So that the judge brought that up. He also brought up that the vast majority of offenses are linked to mental illness and addiction. So I mentioned detox areas. And then there's also various programs that can be brought into the jail to somebody who is being held if there is space for them to meet with a pastor or meet with a social worker and try to learn new habits that might keep them from coming back to the jail. And the absence of those spaces in our current jail means we have more people who need beds. They need to be housed in because of some violation. And then the judge told me that work release programs, which are desirable when they're appropriate, also require space in the jail. So there's doing anything, you need to have the appropriate space to bring the appropriate groups of people together. And these were the 4 items that came from the courts. So these have all been considered in the designs for a possible new jail. All right. What about the courthouse, which is beautiful? The courthouse is quite lovely. It has been modified a few times. There's a parking deck in the back and things like that. And if things move out, the spaces can be reused for something else. But there is one possibility that we would move it all out. We would just move it all out and not take on renovating the courthouse. And there is space up on Sharon Avenue if we want to do that. And when we get to the end of my talk, we'll see what those costs look like to move either partially or all of the things out. And the question of what to do with the courthouse is completely open. During the meeting on April 15th at 10 a.m. in the courtroom, we can start to give to the county commissioners what we think should be done with the courthouse. Do we want to keep it and use it for county services? Or do we want to see if somebody would like to develop something new out of that building? Or I don't know, ideas. That one, we're not much, the jail folks that know how to build jails are neutral on that question. It's really a question for our community, what we want to do with the lovely Houghton County Courthouse. We can keep it too. And then of course, the money issue. Yes, this is going to cost. And let's stop beating around the bush and let's start talking about it. So the committee that I served on was a committee of courthouse stakeholders, of a bunch of people. And I characterize them as stakeholders that are from the courthouse, which are the commissioners themselves. So we had 2 commissioners on the committee, department heads, leaders of programs, administrators, the courts, the prosecuting attorney's office, the jail leadership and staff, and the sheriff himself. We also had community stakeholders, including myself from the League of Women Voters of the Copper Country, but also local political leaders were on there, county supervised, township supervisors, non-political, there were church leaders, us, Copper Shores was in the room, UP Health Aspires was in the room, all right? And so the jail designers went and ran their plans, and they held what they call a charrette. So a charrette is, I had to Google it myself, an intense period of design or planning activity. So it's a very large group of people. I mean, between 20 and 30 people were in the room. We were up at the Franklin Township Hall. That was lovely. Thank you, Mary Sears, for hosting us there. And we heard the presentation from the jail designers, and the room was full of back and forth with them. They brought us their design, which, as I have said previously, included this sort of central area for monitoring the various cells out in a radial configuration. The design, the construction materials, they pointed out that in our current jail, we have vitrine toilets, which you can break those and it can become a weapon. And that's why they don't do that in jails anymore. But the new jail would have the steel bottom, seats, mirrors, etc. You can't break anything and make something. Unfortunately, most of probably what jail designers and users have learned has been learned by something bad happening. And now we don't do it that way because we don't want something bad to happen. The state has standards for double bunking. So they're not planning on double bunking. So if we do outgrow our jail a little bit, there are permissible levels of double bunking according to the Michigan Department of Corrections, but that's not how they designed it. Notice that medium security double bunking is allowed up to 75%, low security double bunking allowed up to 75% also. Good line of sight, that implies this pod structure that I've been calling the radial structure, safe transfers, and flexibility for long-term. Because some of the things we might want to move from the courthouse up to Sharon Avenue, we don't have to do in the first build, but maybe we want to think about that may be something that would be desirable at some future time. So there were 5 designs. There were 4 designs from the designers and 1 design that those of us who were in the room at the charrette said, why don't we try this? But in the end, we evaluated 5 designs. And I'm not going to go through them all because we've actually already narrowed it down. And we narrowed it down because, as I said, the courts were in the room, the community members were in the room, the sheriff's people were in the room, the commissioners were in the room, and we said, no, that, that won't work. This is why. I can't reproduce for you all that conversation, but your representatives and your fellow community members were in the room, and they said, no, these won't work. But there are 2, which they call pre-charrette option 2 and pre-charrette option 4, which we said, let's take these to the board. And actually, they said we could take 3, and if we were really indecisive, 4 to the board. But the charrette participants actually, without dissent, said, no, this is fine, just these 2 options. So there is a slide in my deck about why the pre-charrette options 1, 3, and the charrette option 1 were eliminated, and highlighted in yellow, as I said, were the things that your fellow community members and the staff brought up. This option 1 was very costly, had very high temporary housing costs, major disruption to the current operations during construction, and the longest time to do it. So no. Option 3 was going to lock us in the future. Because of what the plans were in there. And again, I'm not going into the details. And the room wanted a little bit more flexibility because we can't predict the future. So if we have, that's the classic thing, like, oh my gosh, why did those people build the road this way? Now it's awful. And they made it so it's impossible to change. We didn't want to do that. So that's what got rid of option 3. And then the option 1 was like clear to the slab, all knew of everything. It was just, no, that wasn't going to work for us either. So here are the 2 plans that made it out of the charrette. And I want you to just look at it quickly and see that this plan, option 2, has a lot of little building blocks in the center of the lot. And this plan, pre-charrette option 4, has all the building happening on the south end of the lot. Okay, so those are the 2 plans. So let's go back to pre-charrette option 2. It reproduces the existing building as part of the design, but that's what forces everything to be in the center of the lot. But it does end up with the lowest mean cost. You'll notice that down here at the bottom, if we end up with this cell pod in the future is quite a ways away. So that's one of the disadvantages, and that may impact staffing as well. This design makes it a little bit harder to figure out how to bring the courts up, bring the county operations up, if that ever became desirable. But it is we felt a very viable plan. And then in option 2, the use of the current church building was, there's more demolition involved, not completely wiping it to the slab, but more repurposing done. Not the major purposes are in that area. And so it does allow better separation between potential public facing functions, like if we were to move county operations up there, or other things, and the jail part, having nice separate entrances, kind of like how The high schools get to be built, keep the middle schoolers away from the high schoolers and things like that. So keep the jail's activity away from the general public, so that if you're going in just to look up something on the tax rolls, you don't have to feel like you've entered high security, or you see people being moved into court or something like that. So this is pre-charrette option 4. All right, so here's their page that had the costs on them, and the two that are still in the running. And when they cost things out, they gave us high, medium, and low, high, mean, and low costs. In my quickie summaries, I just used the one in the middle. But remember that nothing is guaranteed. So they did say that depending on the details, you may be on a little bit of a higher end or a lower end. And so there are, you could think of that as opportunities for some savings depending on the details as well. And then there are some add-ons in the bottom of some needs that could be done or not done, including addressing the storage issue, adding a work camp, and then adding 10 more beds or 20 more beds to the baseline prices. So these costs are only dealing with the jail. It doesn't address the old jail building and what to do with it and any costs associated with that. It doesn't deal with moving anybody who's not the jail. So this is the major topic of the meeting on April 15th in the courtroom at 10 a.m. is back and forth about these two major plans. And this is too small for you to read. And it's also too much for me to talk about in a talk that I'm hoping won't go on too much longer. But if you go out and get that plan, which is on the county's website, you can dig in. So what options were considered? We considered moving only the courtrooms to the Sharon site, and the court said that will not work for us. We need our staff and our courtrooms. We need it all together. We're back and forth all the time. So that was off the table. They gave us a price for moving the courtrooms and the judges and their staff to the Sharon site. And there is the cost in the summary I'm going to show you soon, right here. I'll get to it. But we're summarizing here. So we have a cost for moving the courts, everything. We have a cost for moving new courtrooms. We have issues related to renovating the courthouse to, let's say that's the least expensive option. We leave the courts back in the courthouse, but we come up with a different solution for moving circulation of the inmates so that issue I described earlier will not be an issue anymore. And then we said there was one option that they put as zero cost, like don't do anything, and that's off the table because the safety needs have to be addressed. And on the table is demolishing the jail and doing nothing with it, selling the property to somebody else maybe, demolishing the jail and making it a parking lot for the courthouse, or fix it up and put something else there, like record storage or some of the offices that are in the courthouse open. So this slide we've actually already seen. Let's just have this summary. So the idea is to build a jail on the Sharon Avenue location, 60 beds following up-to-date regulations. And if we want, we could opt in for 70 or 80 beds. It's going to cost between 26 and 36 just to have the jail built between the two designs and not do anything else. And then input is needed for the desirability of all the other arrangements of what could go into the Sharon Avenue location from the courthouse. So that's really the end of the talk. Because I found it very difficult to add this up. I made a little tool in Microsoft Excel that's on the League of Women Voters of the Copper Country website, and the URL for that is down here, League of Women Voters, coppercountrymichigan.org. And you can add those things. It's like a menu. And the two options from the charrette process, from the consultant process, are at the top, the 26 million and the 34 million. And pick one or the other. And if you're using the Excel, you just put a 1 in this column if that's the one you're picking, or a 0 if it's not. Now, if we moved everything to the Sharon Avenue site, you'd have to add 17 million. If you just move the courtrooms and the judge and their people, 14 and a half roughly. If you move the county functions, but nothing else, but you do fix up the courthouse for secure inmate circulation, 3.2 million. You don't move anything, but you do the absolute minimum. What's the Sally Port is this secure entrance where they can drive up the appropriate vehicle, puts a detained person in there, drive them up to the courts or wherever we're taking them, and then all very secure. That's the last one there. And let's see what happened there with my side. There we go. So that one is the cheapest thing to do, but that, like I said, we consider it essential to solve the safety problem. And then the pink ones are issues, something to do with the abandoned building, the 1963 jail. We can demolish it and construct new courthouses right there. Courthouse, new courtrooms right there. We could. That's an $8 million choice. We could fix up the jail for something else, meaning fix the leaky roof, fix the plumbing, fix all that, and then turn it into, I don't know what, agencies who want to buy it or rent it or loosen up what's packed into the courthouse, whatever we want. Demolish it and make it a parking lot. So that's $200,000, or demolish it and call in the developers and say, what do you want to do with it? Make a plan. Talk to the planning board. And then down there at the bottom in gray are those add-ons that they're not that expensive. It's not that much more expensive to get 10 more beds, but that does impact staffing costs. So I didn't talk about staffing costs, but the report does, and it's in there. But I imagine you're kind of done with my presentation at this point. But please do take a look at the report from the jail experts and dig into whichever part of it feels like the most important that you have questions on, and bring your questions to the meeting on the 15th. I have a slide here where I want to thank all the folks that that are contributing to this process and also contributing to my understanding of the jail issue, the county commissioners and the people in the courthouse, the sheriff and his staff, and the county administrators, the county clerk, all the other members of the jail committee, the consultants, the judges, and I want to give a shout out to some members of the League of Women Voters who served in what I'm doing. They highlighted to the community what was going on with the jail, both in 2011 and 17, and then even after the last millage went down. Barry Fink, Bill Fink, Valerie Troche, and Linda Belote have been working in the past, and I take the baton from you and I carry it forward as we continue to talk to Houghton County about getting a new jail. I want to highlight, so much is available on the web to help you as you want to do homework after having heard my talk. The master plans, this is the URL for directly obtaining the master plan, but if you just go to the www.houghtoncounty.net, right on the front page, they've made it easy to find that. If you go to the League of Women Voters of the Copper Country in Michigan website, League of Women Voters Copper Country MI, you can find the little trifold that will be a giveaway at our public meetings. You can find this PowerPoint presentation. You can find that Excel calculator. And there are going to be 2 in-person meetings that I'm going to be the moderator for and the speaker for, where this presentation will be given live. And that's April 2nd, and today is March 31st, so that's this Wednesday, in Houghton at the library, the Portage Lake District Library, 6 p.m. And the other scheduled event is in Hancock at 5th and Elm in Hancock, also at 6 p.m. on Monday, April 7th. And we have a few more in the works that I can't tell you about till I know for sure they're going to happen. And if you want me to come and talk to your group, contact me through the League of Women Voters Copper Country website, and let's talk. So the meeting that I keep talking about with the jail consultants is on Tuesday, April 15th, 2025, 10 a.m. till noon in the courtroom at the county courthouse. And thank you for your attention.
Well, thank you, Faith. This has been a wonderfully informative and important part of what we consider to be League of Women Voters' general mission, which is to have an informed electorate. And thank you, Faith, for presenting in a very clear and very important way many of the details. As you know, if you've done any work on this topic, anybody who's looked at these many documents out there, this has been a long, ongoing process that many dedicated individuals have been working on for decades to try to do. So we appreciate your work, Faith, in bringing this clarity to us here today. I don't want to take a lot of time for questions, but I just want to point out that, people seem to think that we could just take the old jail and build it higher, or just add on to that position. And you've done a wonderful job to explain to us today that this is not simply a matter of adding on to an already failing building, that there are problems with the roof, with the cells, that the staffing and the pod structure of how you use a limited number of people to have observation over all these different cells, and the need for the number of specific kind of cells so you're not mixing our populations. Those are significant factors that any jail site has to take care of. So do you
Well,
have
and
any?
up on this jail would leave the jail in downtown Houghton, which was the primary cause of the fail, in my opinion, of the 2018 millage.
Yeah, the two big things were, we don't want the jail to be too big, and we don't want the jail to be downtown. And now having the site that we have, that Houghton has bought, up on top of the hill, allows for more space, allows for much more careful space, so that I think one judge complained that after he had sentenced somebody, he had to walk back to his chambers past the people who he had just sentenced in court. So there's a lot of safety issues involved, like you said, about moving people who have been sentenced back and forth around the public by having to go outside the building, which has indeed caused problems in locations before. So there's a lot of important considerations, and it's not just a matter of saying, oh, well, we'll just build a bigger jail. It's not just a bigger jail. It has to be a better purpose jail with up-to-date standards in terms of beds and not having china sinks that can be broken up and used as weapons. So a lot of important considerations. It really behooves people to spend, I think it's been almost an hour here, spend time listening to the details, come to the meetings, do bring questions for your representatives about concerns that you might have. But this is something that is, as Faith has made an excellent point, is only getting more expensive over time. So it's not something we can keep on kicking down the road. It has to be done and taken into consideration very soon. So I know that there are board issues discussing bond issues coming up that will be perhaps on some soon to be determined date. Do you have any information about that, Faith, or is that something still being determined?
The report from the consultants does have some numbers about bonding. And I'm not an expert on that financial aspect, but I talked to some of the county commissioners and they are digging into those. And I know that the administrative staff who work for the county are actively taking the steps. You have to get the appropriate bonding agents lined up to figure out how we could possibly have a bond. The numbers that are in the report are pretty modest in terms of the cost on somebody who has a house worth $200,000 with $100,000 state equalized value on it. I didn't think they were that high. I'm not going to talk about that just because I think it's really hard to know. As you saw with the calculator, the numbers for how much might be built, it's still up in the air. So it wouldn't be responsible to be throwing those out ahead of the discussion. But there are some slides in the packet from the consultants that does address. It's in the back third of the package that people can take a look at and see. Come to the meeting on the 25th. I'm sure millage numbers will sneak out of the mouths of people who are the actual decision makers.
And I think one of the important points too is that to do nothing is going to be expensive. To even say, oh, well, this is a problem we can put off for another 10 years is going to cost us in terms of transportation to other jails, possible fines that we'll experience, jails being thrown into receivership and having to do to move the prisoners completely to different places cost us, because every time somebody has to drive down, it's not one person driving downstate to pick up a person housed down there. It's a couple of people taking a couple of days at a time. And they're not just random people. These are sheriffs who are being paid. So this is all very.
They won't be patrolling Houghton County while they're on the road, you know? Yeah, no, it's absolutely, and don't forget what I said at the beginning of the experience of the sheriff in Florida. It's like, once you trigger, that oversight step, there's no going back. There's no like, sorry, let's just, rerun. No, once they say you're closed, now you're working for them. Now we lose all of our decision making, and no, nobody wants that. Nobody
And
wants. They don't understand Houghton County. They don't understand what the trade-offs are that we'd want to use, but they'll make it happen if we push it that far.
And all those costs that we're spending on transporting people could be put to the use of building a better jail in the first place.
Right.
So having those being invested locally for a local solution to a problem, as opposed to outsourcing it to another place, is just.
Never get those legal fees back. You get the legal services, but that money just poof, gone.
So, well, thank you, Faith. This has been a really wonderful presentation. Thank you so much for all the work that you've done on behalf of the league and on behalf of the people of Houghton County. We really appreciate your work on this. And to all the people who have served on this committee, we know that there's been a lot of voices in this, and it's taken a lot of time. So we on the league appreciate the fact that people really wish to inform the population here about what the consequences are of all these different decisions. So again, the mission of the league is always to have a more informed electorate. We hope that you will pay attention to this and come and participate in these kinds of discussions. It's really critical that you do so. So thank you very much, Faith. We really appreciate this.
Thank you, Vicki, for being here with me today.
Okay. It's been a delight. Thank you. It's been it's a tough topic, and we appreciate that it's not something that is a pleasant topic to talk about for people, but it's a critical one. So thank you for this.